Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Modular. Today I'm looking at the Poly-8 VCO from Wavefonix. Poly-8, 8 oscillators, 8 individual complete Eurorack style oscillators, analog oscillators, 3340 oscillators packed into a single module. Laid out like oscillators, they look exactly like you would have them individually, but packed into a single front panel. Now, Wavefonix are on a mission to bring a bit of polyphony to Eurorack. 8 oscillators, 8 notes, 8 things all happening at once. Is that possible in Eurorack? Well, yeah, of course it is. You just need a lot of stuff to make that happen. Now, Wavefonix are working on an entire polyphonic system, because in order to create each voice in synthesis, you need a number of things working together. You need an oscillator going into a filter, going into a VCA, with envelopes attached to that to shape it. And you need that going on multiple times. That's what polyphony is all about, at a very basic level. And so along with the Poly-8 is going to be a big sort of multi-channel filter and a multi-channel VCA, multi-channel envelopes, all those sorts of things working together to give you a proper polyphonic experience within Eurorack. That is not what I have at the moment. What Wavefonix have sent me is the Poly-8, just the VCO. So what I've got is 8 oscillators, and then I've got to work out what the heck to do with that, because I don't have enough modules to create a proper 8-voice polyphonic synthesizer. I just don't have the gear, and I've used every single cable and almost every single module that I own in order to attempt to do that sort of thing. At the moment it's sort of wired up as a 4-voice, 2-oscillator synthesizer, which is interesting, and we'll get to that, because there's lots and lots and lots of things you can do with 8 oscillators. And what is interesting about this being in modular is that they're not tethered together in the way that they would be in a regular polyphonic synthesizer. I mean, this has been highlighted very recently by GeForce releasing their OBE, their emulation of the Oberheim 8-voice, because the Oberheim 8-voice was essentially 8 monosynths stuck in a rack of their SEMs, their SEM little monosynths stuck together. Because what happens when you do it in a modular sense is that you have to tune each oscillator separately and individually, and deal with each oscillator separately and individually, which means dealing with every voice separately. You getting what I'm saying? So when you have a regular polyphonic synthesizer, you play a whole bunch of notes, a bunch of chords, and you turn one filter, and that filters all of the voices, not paraphonically but polyphonically. It affects each filter on every voice. Similar with the LFO, similar with the tuning. All those sorts of things work together brilliantly in a polyphonic synthesizer, because before they did that with things like the Oberheim 8-voice, you had to do each voice individually, the filter on every single one. So if you're going to play a 4-note chord, a 3-note chord, you've got 3 filters, 4 filters to move simultaneously together. And that has its challenges, obviously, but it also brings a unique flavour. So when you're playing a chord, you could be modulating each oscillator within that chord completely differently, filtering them completely differently, have them routed off to do different things differently, and that's quite a unique approach that you don't find in other forms of synthesis. However, I have to look at this in simple terms, because I literally do not have the gear to run this as an 8-voice polyphonic synthesizer. So what can I do with 8 oscillators? Well, I could play 8 tunes from 8 sequences all going together, or play 4 tunes from 2 oscillators together. I could make one big single unison with 8 oscillators and play that on one note or one sequence. I could stuff each oscillator into the FM input of each of the other ones if I wanted to. I don't know that I do want to do that. But anyway, in thinking about this and what I could show with the Poly-8, I reached out to the community and asked people to suggest things, and they did, and it was kind of helpful. At least it helped me sort of focus together on a few ideas. But mostly, I can only really do what I can do with the gear I have. So this video, in my bumbling introduction, is really just to show off the Poly-8 to give you an idea of what 8 oscillators could sound like in Eurorack, I suppose, and to patch it together with a few thoughts and ideas. So that's the plan. I'm not saying that this is the right way to go about it, because there's 1,000 different ways you could patch this and wire this up. I'm just going to give it a go. I'm going to talk about it. I'll show you how I'm patching things together, in the hope that that's either entertaining or useful or inspirational to you people out there. Now, I should state that Wavefonix have sent this to me for review. I don't own it, I haven't purchased it, and so this is essentially paid promotion for them, which is cool, but I can say whatever I like about it. They haven't given me any instructions as to how to approach it, or what nice things I should say about it. And so everything that I say in this video is entirely from me, from my own brain and my own experience of working with the fella. Now, the biggest downside of 8 oscillators is the patching, is the amount of patching, the amount of time everything takes to patch it in, to get it to work, the stuff you need, the cables. I literally have no more. Well, I've got a couple of cables here, almost no more cables, so it's quite a mammoth job, but it is interesting. So what I'm gonna have to do, I'll pull all these cables out, I'll pull them all out, because I'm gonna have to show you how I put it together, and we'll start again with something simple and see where we go from there. Yeah, sound like a plan? Right, first of all, let me introduce you to the Poly-8 VCO. 8 oscillators. These are based on the 3340 chip. That's the sort of oscillator you will find in the SH101, the Prophet 5, and similar synthesizers. Each one of these is identical. You've got coarse and fine tuning, you've got pulse width and pulse width modulation, attenuator on the input there, 1 volt per octave input, a sync input. You've then got 3 waveform outputs. You've got sawtooth, triangle and square. And you've got an FM input with an amount and whether it's exponential or linear. You've got that 8 times. So in my simplest patch here, I've got all 8 outputs going into a muton here, which provides me with the output of each oscillator, which is then going through my scope to my output. Got a little bit of reverb on the output just to keep it interesting. And so there we go. Currently we've got a square wave plugged in. And we're going to be a little bit careful because all of these waveforms are going to add up to produce all sorts of overlapping waveforms that could be a bit distorted when acting together. So you can play with them just like that, just turn them on and then move them about, see what happens. But I'm going to try to do something a little bit more intentional. I'll get to drones later on, I think. To start with, we want to play the oscillators as a sound, as a unison, because that, I think, is where you really appreciate what something like this could offer in your rack. So for this, I'm going to use the sawtooth output in order to create kind of a super saw sort of flavour. Now what you're going to have to do a lot of is tune the things. So on my scope here I have a tuner, and so we'll take the first output. So this is, you'll have to do this a lot. As I say, tuning is a big part of it. It all just takes a whole load of time. You can do it by ear, and a lot of it I probably will, but just to start off, let's see if we can tune the thing together as a starting point. So there we go. I'm going to tune relatively low because I know that the keyboard, the key step here, tends to whack everything up really high. So let's tune to A1, shall we? Or maybe C1. That seems really low. Okay, A1 it is. Now when tuning, you know, I'm not looking or expecting perfection. You know, these are analog oscillators. They move about, that's why we like them. And you'll see in a minute as to why that's good. But with a little bit of fine tuning, I should be able to get it more or less bang on. That'll do. Next one. Ooh. There, okay. So there's our first one. See, we've got our waveform going on here. Then as I bring them in, you'll see the waveform change because they're not perfectly synced to one another. And you get that rather nice phasing effect. And that is a gorgeously gooey sound. Just lovely. Right, what I'm going to do, I need to be able to play this somehow. So I'm going to play it with my key step here. In order to get all of these oscillators to run at the same time, I need to send each one pitch information into the 1 volt per octave. So this is where the cabling starts getting interesting. So in order to achieve this, I'm going to have to take a pitch output from the key step and split it 8 ways. How am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to have to use a mult, and a buffered mult as well. I could just use something like, I can lay my hands on one. No, I can't. Something like, something like that, or stackable cables potentially. But you do suffer from a bit of voltage drop when multing in this way. And particularly if you're dealing with pitch, then that's going to start to make your pitching inaccurate. So ideally you need a buffered mult. Now I have one of those up here. Still a lot of shifting around on the camera, I think. Which is this fella, the dupe. The dupe from Tenderfoot. So I'm going to take the output from the key step into the top of there. Now, it lights the top light, but then it lights the rest because this is normalized down. So anything I put in number 1 at the top comes out of these 3 outputs, but also comes out of these other outputs. And this gives me 9, potentially, outputs, but of course the 8 that I need to go into the Poly-8. So that's the plan. That's what I'm going to do. So I just need a bunch of cables. There'll be a lot of cables shifting, because I need ones which are long enough. Now I could have completely reconfigured my rack, of course, to make this happen better, perhaps. But again, it's just time, and I had various things to do in order to make that happen, so we're just doing with what we can. And it's kind of the reality of dealing with these sorts of situations. Is also important, you know. What I could have done is sorted the lengths of all my cables. That might have been helpful. 8. Right, now with a bit of luck, I'm only laughing because I've already done this a couple of times now, and it's, you know, it all just sort of works, kind of works. but I'm not fully practiced. So that's a single sawtooth. I'm not gating it at the moment because that's obviously a whole other heartache. Let's bring some more in. How lovely is that? Let's introduce a little bit of something. Now at the moment all we're listening to is purely oscillators. There's no effect other than reverb. I can take the reverb off. And we're just listening to the oscillators. There's no other effects going on, no other form of modulation. It's all purely making that sound by the combination of these waveforms. I like a little bit of reverb. So in order to gate it, to make it a more dynamic, I suppose, thing, I would need to be running everything through VCAs. I mean, the mute-on is sort of a VCA. You've got CV inputs here, so you could use envelopes on each channel, but it starts to balloon very fast. Now, what we could do is we could put this, the output of this, through a VCA and gate that. So that would give us what we would call paraphonic control over these 8 oscillators. It's not polyphony. We're just using this as a single note, and then we're running that through a single VCA. I could also put it through a filter. So why don't I do that? So I'm going to take the output, stick it into the Jove filter over here. That is then going into the Veils VCA, and then I could take a gate output from the key step, stick it into the CV input on the Veils. With a bit of luck, but then what we really want is a bit of envelope. So why don't we trigger an envelope over here? In fact, yeah, let's use this filter while it happens to be wired in, and that should give me an envelope and a VCA into the same into the same module. So this is going into the Behringer filter amp, coupled with the dual envelope generator. Sounds really nice. Now, are we really gaining anything from having all of these oscillators running at once? So if I was to take them out, see what that sounds like. Yeah, I mean, that's the original sawtooth that we would be enjoying. We like a good sawtooth, and that would be it on its own. Then when we bring them all back in, it's so much thicker, so much more lovely. Got a new filter in from British Noise Electronics I'd really just quite like to try. So I'm just going to run this straight into that. Where am I going to take it out? Oh, I can take it out to Veils over there. So that's the output. Take it in out of Veils. I'm going to use the gate on, this is not rocket science, envelope over there, which happens to have two outputs, so I can make use of that to have one output going to the filter and another output going to the VCA. So I need the out. What do I need? I need the output of the filter going somewhere. start putting in a few intervals or octaves just to move the oscillators around. And I'm going to have a go at doing that by ear. Because as you push it off, you get that lovely sense of something. See, I stuck that one up an octave. Lovely, lovely. Let's just stick it back in by itself. That's without any filtering or effects on at all. That's just it as it is. So there are lots of ways. You get dragged off into doing all sorts of things. Now, in order to put this back to where I was, of course, I'm going to have to retune everything. So what I find is that when playing with the Poly-8, you start off with something sensible, and then it just starts to move away from itself. I mean, the one thing that would make this better at this point for me would be able to pan everything around, to put different oscillators in different places, so that it's not just all coming out as one wall of sound. I could actually place it around the place a bit more spatially. I think that would be one way to improve what I'm currently doing. But heck, having this sound that's coming out of here is just, I mean, it sounds big synthesizer as opposed to modular. And that's what's quite interesting about it. Right, Unison is a lot of fun then. Undoubtedly. A lot of fun. You know, just that by itself is reason enough to have more than one oscillator doing something together at the same time. And I often pair up some make noise STOs I've got over here, just to give that thickness, that slight phasing, that chorusing effect, and to give one of your sounds just that bit more juice. But with 8 oscillators, you know, it's huge, fat, squelchy, lovely sound. Just for that, it's enough. It's enough reason to have something of this nature. And of course you could compartmentalize it out. You could have 4 pairs, 2 lots of 4, you know. It's up to your own imagination as to what combinations of things you could use for that. You could mix together your waveforms so it's sawtooth from one, square wave from another. Is that interesting? I have no idea. But there's no reason why you can't experiment with that sort of thing. Right, next up, I'm going to have a go at some proper polyphony. Well, at least playing chords. Because the other thing you can do with this, of course, you could set it to a chord and then play one-fingered chords on things. That's possible. I think you know what that sounds like. I did a bit of that by moving octaves around the place. And that's actually reminds me to point out that something that I think perhaps could be better about the Poly-8 is that it could have octave switches. I've got other oscillators that have octave switches, like the Honor here. You know, rather than having a coarse tuning, you have an octave. So you just go up and down octaves and then you use a fine tune knob to tune in between them. With something like this that you are likely to be using at intervals, then having an octave switch would just make the tuning so much easier. Because once you're tuned, you can then knock a couple up and a couple down, and you've got like sub bass and higher register stuff going on. That would make that so much smoother to do that. So that, you know, Wavefonix is a feature request there if you're thinking about making more of these, or a version 2 octave switches. That would be useful. So anyway, as I was saying, you can create a chord on this and then play that on one finger. Yeah, nice, very dance music-y, very dancey, superb. But what I would like to do is play a chord from my keyboard, so address each note individually. How do you do that? Well, you would either need a very clever keyboard with lots of control voltage outputs, or you need a clever module, and I have one of those. It's the Hermod, hidden over here around the corner. I'll bring you in a minute. And the Hermod from Squarp Instruments is a bit of a modular brain, but one thing it can do is you can take a MIDI in and it can squirt that out over 8 CV outputs. And depending how you set that up depends on how that sort of works, but the way that I found it working best is on some kind of cyclic mode, so that every note you press goes to the next CV output. And that way, as you press one note, it sends one CV output to your first oscillator. As you hold a second note, it sends a second CV out to your next oscillator, and so on. So you can then create a chord and play it like a regular polyphonic synthesizer. Now that's not exactly modular in vibe, I suppose. It's much more synthesizer in vibe, but it's worth giving that a go, I think. And the fact that I have this means that I can. So I'm going to try it. Now again, I don't have enough filters, envelopes and VCAs in order to achieve a proper polyphonic situation where each oscillator has its own filter, VCA and envelopes. I just don't have enough. So I'm just going to use the 8 oscillators and play those and have the output, like I have been before, going through a single filter and VCA, I think. Or do I? How would I? Could I? Possibly. I'll have a little think about that as I'm putting it together, because I am, after I've done this bit of polyphony, the next thing I was going to do was to change the Poly-8 into 4 2-oscillator voices, if that makes sense, because I do have enough filters and VCAs to do that, to run a pair, put them together, mix them together and run them through a load of stuff. So I could do that. I could do that while I'm using this in a similar sort of way, although I was going to develop that through using a sequencer to make it more modular. Wonder whether I could do the same. That's going to be interesting. So I'll start off with 8 oscillators, as I said, coming out of the Hermod, just pure paraphonically through a single filter and VCA. Then I might see if I can try to do a 4 voice from there, because that will be different. And then we'll look at addressing it differently from a sequencer, where you're essentially using 4 pairs separately. Yeah, I'm thinking up new things all the time. So let's have a go at that. Now, first of all, before I get myself too excited by all this, I'm going to have to tune my oscillators again. So Hermod here, 8 outputs. The idea is that I take MIDI from the key step, plug that in, and then I need to find my way into the right menu. 8 voices, not unison this time, because you could also do that. I could have plugged MIDI into here and then taken that straight out rather than going through the mult as I did, but I thought I'd trying to show as many ways as possible. So I'm going to go for polyphonic. Now somewhere there's a setting for that. How do I get to that setting? I did find it. Allocator. Okay. Cyclic. I tried it in I don't know if it's the Hermod or if it's me, but when I had this in poly mode, the sort of default poly mode, it would do strange things to the pitching. So but when I changed it to cyclic, what happens is then this is done. I don't know why it does the order it's doing, but it means that every note goes to a different output, and that seemed to hold its pitch much, much better. There's probably something I'm not understanding, but you know, I'm not going to dwell on that forever. So let's get this plugged in and we'll see where we're going. So I can take all of the ones that came out of here essentially. So that's gate, so I want CV. So I can gate these individually, and that might be fun. So that's hopefully that all working. Let's turn these on. Now what we're experiencing here is all of these notes are sounding all the time, and although I'm pitching them individually, that's only happening when it's cycling through that note. So this is still sounding here, and gradually they'll all become C. if you see what I mean. Which is interesting. However, I think what it needs is a little bit of more level control, because everything is just coming straight out of a Muton. I need to introduce some VCAs just to get control over the output of each one so that they don't push together and distort quite so readily. So for that, I need to take all of the outputs, all 8, and I've got a Veils up here and another Veils over there. I've got one here as well that I could use in order to achieve that. So let's see if I can. Let's see if I've got enough cables. I don't think I've done it this way around before. Like a stick. Well, let's try at the very least. Let's try to see if I can sort this out. Let's see what I've got. Got some long uns. Right, long uns are good. So let's take output 1 and 2. Stick them through. Let's get this around the right way. 1, 2. Quite nice, that's quite Star Trek. Go for that. See, that's already a lot better. So let's bring in my other 4. That's the other 4. Yeah, interesting. So, do I have enough cables and enough reach to be able to gate all of them? Well, let's give it a go. Let's give it a go. So, longer cables. Whoop. So, gate from here. So there. They aren't quite long enough. So this is where practicalities start becoming a problem. There's a long one. Talk amongst yourselves. Right, that's 4. The other ones are relatively close to each other. There we go, gated. Now I don't have enough envelopes, so that's not going to happen at this stage. That's note stealing. Now I could run half of it through a filter over here. And the other half here I could run through a filter. Let's put my new favourite filter back in. Now, I could just throw in, rather than trying to make this clever, because I could sort of molt out a gate in order to trigger an envelope in order to control the filter, or I could just stick in an LFO and see what happens. Like that, and then over here. This is very much a see what happens kind of video. It's probably going on for hours. See, while I'm doing this and enjoying myself, the card, of course, has got full. So I've taken 4 oscillators through one VCA, mix them together, put it through a filter on one side, another 4 going through a VCA through another filter, having both filters modulated differently. Which is pretty interesting, and obviously if I had more gear I could split each one individually off and be individually modulating everything on its own independently to have lots of interesting things going on. Similarly, this could actually, if you give it a single note, is now going through different oscillators. And so depending on which oscillator it goes to will depend on which filter it's going through. That's quite nice. This grit oscillator, man, that's extraordinary. There's just tons and tons of different permutations. Now, the next thing I wanted to do is to plug in some modulation to the pulse width. So if we were to go for our square wave outputs, I mean, that's another thing. You don't have to have them all on the same output. I'm only doing that for simplicity, really, and clarity. I can have it all, what have I got, 24 outputs all mixed together somewhere if I wanted, or choose from the ones that I want to use. So now we're on to square waves. If I just play some chords again to see if we can have a difference. That sounds like a party going on. If I was to time sync it up, that might... Let's see what happens if we introduce a little bit of pulse width modulation. Now I've only got 6 LFOs coming out of the Maestro, so... It does offer some additional movement, but you've already got so much movement going on because of the interplay of the waveforms in the first place that I don't know that it particularly adds anything to it. Yeah, maybe. I mean, let's plug that into the FM input just to do a similar sort of thing. Obviously, I've only got this running on 6 oscillators at the moment. So let's put all those just to the middle. Let's move to the triangle, and then we're going to move on to do the 4 voice sequenced in a minute. Just want to try this out on a little bit of a smoother sound. It's funny, it only takes a tiny bit of FM, I mean. Right, yes, there are many possibilities and probabilities and all sorts of things one can do in this space. And I think you're getting the idea of it. I think you're getting the idea of it. I think I am, or somebody is. Hopefully somebody is getting the idea of it. Right, so what I'm going to do now, I think there's two things left to play with. First one is I want to try to show you a 4-voice 2-oscillator arrangement, because that seemed to work quite well in practice, where I route from a sequencer, I pair up the oscillators in order to create a 4-voice synth, or really just to create 4 2-oscillator combination synth type things. Anyway, like I say, that worked quite well, so I'm going to give that a go and show how I patch that together, because that is, you know, a very enormously useful thing to do with the Poly-8. And then after that we'll finish off with a bit of droning, to see if that's interesting, and then we'll leave it there. Otherwise this is just going to keep going on for hours. So everything should already be tuned, so that's not a problem. Let's get rid of all this modulation out of there for the minute. The trick is going to be combining up oscillators through a filter for some kind of something that's useful. So let's take, we're going to do this on square waves, I think, just for fun. Everything is still plugged into the mute on. And so that's where I'm going to take my outputs from. So what I want to do is mix 2 oscillators together, route those through a filter. Now I can do that through VCAs, or do I want to use the VCAs at the end? I'm going to need 4. I don't want to do VCA and then VCA. I want to mix 2 things together. So I've got a mixer here which lets me do 2 into 1 and then 2 into 1. I've got a mixer here that lets me do 2 into 1. Then I've got a filter that has 2 inputs. There you go. That's my answer. Alright, so let me take output 1 into mixer here. Abstract data mixer. Lovely. Output 2, which is going to go into there. What am I doing? Take the output 2, because they're normalized down, into that. There we go. So that's our first 2 oscillators into there, and this is going to be run by the black sequencer. So I'm going to take CV1, how did I do this? How on earth did I do this? Take CV1 into the mult, then the output of the mult into 1 volt per octave into there, 1 volt per octave there. So now this should play it. Excellent. So that's now playing those two, going through this one filter. What I don't have for it at the moment is a gate. So I need the output to go through a VCA. I can then gate that from the gate out on the Erica synths. But I currently have no envelope. Now I could probably take an envelope from the mod output. And for the filter, I could just give it a bit of a sweep for now. Okay, so that's one setup. The next two, then, let's take CV2 output, put that through the other half of my mulch here. That can go into VC3. I've got a mixer over here. I can take output 2, rather output 3 into there, output 4, take it all the way over here to my British noise filter. That needs to come over to the VCA as well. Oh. So for 5 and 6, they'll have to come in from another channel on here on my dupe mult to go into there. Take out channel 3 on here, plug that into there. That should now be getting channel 3 information, and I'm going to want the outputs 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Take these up into the filter amp. That's a bit easier. And I'm just getting a gate out from 3 into there. And I need an output plugged in somewhere. Some kind of output. There. Right, 7 and 8, I'm going to bring through what filters we've got left. Okay, I've got another 2 inputs on the Instruo filter here. just getting straightforward gating. Now if I take this, stick it over, oh look, I've got a dual envelope generator here as well, the 1003. Maybe that would make things a little bit more interesting. And this is coming from the grit over here. Running by the Perkles. Interesting. And there's our filter amp. And we have that coming through the Instruo filter. We give that some triangles, just for fun. So here's another one. Right, here's another one. Let me show you. So coming back to the Hermod, I'm going MIDI in from the Arturia keyboard, and then I'm taking 4 channels out, 4 channels of polyphony out, if you like, into 4 pairs. My 4 pairs of oscillators that I ran with the sequencer, and now I'm going to run them directly from the keyboard as if it's a 4-voice synthesizer. Now this one is going, trying to get this right, is going up to the Jove as its filter. This pair, I forget really, but let's say that this pair is probably going through the grit filter. This pair then is going up through the filter amp, and this final pair is going through the Intruso ladder filter here. So they're all gated, they're all enveloped. I've got the edge cutter doing things over here, I've got the dual envelope there, I've got the other spare dual envelope there, and the maths all involved in this. And what's potentially beautiful about this particular combination is that I'm just going to start playing, start messing around, and then I'm going to be doing different things with the filters, different modulations, different envelopes and other bits and pieces. I might bring the Maestro in as well as a bit of fun, because that has triggerable LFOs, so you can trigger a chain of LFOs to do different things to the different notes. Are you with me? It's now very late at night on another night. Not the day I was doing this before, this is a whole other night. I'm now getting stuck into this for one last hurrah before I move on to something else. So let's see what we can see, and hopefully it will be interesting. Well, nice. There you go. That's a whole bunch of playing with the Wavefonix Poly-8. I'll finish off this nonsense with a bit of droning, just to run us out. Just running all 8 at once and then changing the levels between them. So I'm going to run them all through VCAs in order to change levels and start changing the pitch. I might try sequencing a couple of them at the same time. I don't know, I'm just going to explore it. I'll start with everything on the same note and then I'll start playing with it, see where it takes me. I mean, I think that's all you can do really is experiment. I mean, I don't think I've shown you anything groundbreaking. All I guess I hope to show was how much of a playground the Poly-8 is. It encourages you to use sound in different ways to crash them into each other. Oh, of course. Of course, FM. How could I forget FM? Everybody seems to be fascinated with FM. So why don't I do some of that? Well, the easiest thing for me to do at this point is just to plug the output of the second oscillator into the first one, instant FM. Should I do that and see what happens? Yeah, why don't I do that? Because that's all I'm going to do. A lot of people have said to me that, oh wow, you should make 8 operator FM. Yeah, no. No, it sounds rubbish. I spent a whole day trying to get a suitable a suitable FM tone out of anything. Now, that's not to say that you can't do that. With a pair of oscillators, you can do FM beautifully and get clangy, belly sorts of noises. You could go for 3, maybe even 4 oscillators if you try really, really, really hard. But it's difficult. It's difficult in analog. You need a computer brain, really, which is holding all these things together at the proper intervals, proper ratios, and dealing with them in that kind of precise way. Because just to try to do it off feel, I personally find that very, very hard. So FM, no. But I've got a spare 5 minutes. Let's just see what happens if I plug it in. Just using the sequence we've got. Would that work? Don't know. Let's give that a try. Let's give that a try. All right, back to where we were then. Okay, cool. I'm going to stick this up here a little bit so you can see. So I'm just going to take the output of 2, put it into 1. Yeah? Do that. So let's read it running and see what happens. I might reduce down to sine waves or triangles. Right, they're all in. Now the problem, as you see, is that each oscillator is actually tuned to the same, so there's no ratio going on. Now if I wanted to make this a bit more dramatic, I could switch to exponential. See, that one's really liking it. Because that one is on exponential. And then the rest of it is just going to get crazy. So let's just focus on this one just for a minute. See, that's alright. Now if I push the second VCO to a different ratio, again if I had an octave switch, that would be really good at this point. That's pretty good. Let's try the next one. There you go, there's some FM. And of course you could plug the output of one line into the input of another lot, and then you've got a whole load more FM stuff going on if that's what you want. If that's what you want to spend your time doing, that's fine. That's up to you. You go do that. So the Poly-8 again from Wavefonix. In this strange exploratory video, I hope that something in there has been of use to you, and I hope this doesn't take me 3 weeks just to edit it down to some kind of sensible place. So that's been enormous fun. I do hope at some time soon to show more of the Poly-8 going through the other modules by Wavefonix as we start to build this kind of polyphonic modular thing. That's going to be fascinating. So I'm looking forward to that journey, and Wavefonix seem to be up for the idea of sending them to me to have a go. So we'll see what happens with that. But in the meantime, this has been the Poly-8. I'm going to make some drones, and you should probably go and make some tunes.